and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Wednesday, April 17th, 2024. This is live number 27. If you can believe it, we're almost to 100. Quarter of the way to 100, I guess. In a few more weeks, we'll be there. Great as always to be with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. 1-844-861-5537, 844-861-5537 is the call-in number if you would like to call in. And of course, as always, you can use the chat. I'm seeing right now that we already have someone in the chat, and this individual is saying that they are from Maui. Hello, or aloha, as they say there. I love Maui. You know, that reminds me of a recent interview that I did with Tulsi Gabbard, who obviously was a U.S. representative serving from the state of Hawaii. She ran for president as a Democrat in 2020, and then she left the Democratic Party about 2 years ago. And now she is, I think, one of the most outstanding voices for common sense. And so I encourage you to check out that interview. It's on this YouTube channel. You can just look up Julie Hartman, Tulsi Gabbard. That was a great interview. You know, I really admire Tulsi Gabbard for many reasons, but one of the biggest is that she has a rare quality that has always been rare throughout the history of humanity, but I think is especially rare in the age that we're living in now. And that is that she is unafraid to admit when she might have been wrong, and she is unafraid to change course if she thinks that she was wrong. That is a really outstanding quality for a person to have. And she wrote this book called Love of Country, Why I Left the Democratic Party, and discusses that turnaround, realizing that the Democratic Party was no longer the party that she had once joined. And so I guess already in the first 3 minutes of Timeless, it's turned into a big shout out to Tulsi Gabbard, but a big welcome to those of you tuning in, and especially this individual in Maui. Sean, hello. Usually I introduce you right away. Great to be with you as always. Are you going to cut in and say something?
It's all around us, Jules.
So you know what's really great? So, you know, yesterday there was a little bit of a faux pas on Timeless Live. And right now there's another faux pas, which is that I cannot hear you. So,
you cannot hear me?
Forgive me for 1 second as I turn around. This is a behind-the-scenes look.
Everybody else hears
and see
me.
if I can do this myself.
Lucky them.
Turn on my my thing here. I don't know why that was not turned on, but
oh no, it's the back of your head.
This is just behind the scenes. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I can't hear you, so I'm going to have to continue on as is. And I appreciate that Sean is continuing to speak, even though I can't hear him, but I'm sure that whatever he's saying is great and brilliant. Maybe as we're playing one of the videos, we can fix that. You know, I want to start off the show by talking about Caitlin Clark. Have you guys heard of Caitlin Clark? If you haven't heard of Caitlin Clark, where the heck have you been? She is so cool. I have become really fascinated by her journey. She is this 6 foot tall pro WNBA basketball player. She was just drafted in the NBA. She played, or I guess continues to play, college basketball at Iowa, and she was the #1 draft pick for the Indiana Fever, which is fantastic.
Once you've been drafted,
so funny again that Sean is cutting in because he thinks that I can hear him. But I can't. Let's watch some highlights, though, of Caitlin playing.
Watching Asia Wilson play. Oh, behind the back and right into net. Stitching Caitlin Clark doing Caitlin Clark things behind the back. Is there anything she can't do? I think the answer is no.
If I had transferred earlier in my career, I wouldn't be having the time of my life right now. Holy smokes. Another deep three.
Look at that shot.
Caitlin Clark.
That is an unbelievable player. You know that she was the all-time leading scorer across all men's and women's college basketball. So no shock that she was the #1 draft pick for the Indiana Fever. Here's a photo of her at the draft night the other night, and she's wearing Prada. Prada actually went out of their way to go dress Caitlin Clark. When I see a photo like that, doesn't it kind of remind you of when you were in school and you ran into your teacher outside, like in real life? If you were out at the grocery store and you ran into your teacher, whenever I see these like badass athletes who I'm very used to seeing in a uniform out in real life, it's like kind of a shock a bit to the system to see them so dolled up and looking so nice. But she is just unbelievable. Yeah, someone's writing, Caitlin Clark is doing the impossible, and that's bringing viewers into the WNBA. Oof, burn. I think Brittany Griner was pretty good about bringing some viewers into the WNBA after that whole fiasco. But you're absolutely right about that with Caitlin Clark.
One of the things I was saying when you couldn't hear me is that once you're drafted, oh no, you can't hear me again?
No, I can now.
Tell me you can.
I
you
can
can.
now.
I was saying, once you've been drafted, you cease to play college basketball. She is no longer an amateur athlete. She is a professional. And I heard that announcers say, is there anything she can't do? And yes, there is. She cannot make what a man makes playing basketball.
That is true. And people are saying, because she's making $300,000, according to the news websites I've consulted with, being drafted into the WNBA, but that doesn't even count endorsements.
No, she will make a lot of money.
She'll make a lot of money.
And she'll make a lot more than a lot of male athletes. But that 300 is her total contract. She makes about 76,000 her first year.
Wow. Well, she'll get a lot of extra money and endorsements. What do you think about that? You know, people online are saying that it is indicative of the gender pay gap in sports. That in her first year she's making $76,000 as compared to somebody in the NBA who makes millions in their first year. What do you think?
You have to put butts in seats. And if you put butts in seats, you make money. And if you make money, then you get paid more.
It's a very Sean McConnell way of putting it. Very Sean McConnell way of putting it. So I've been watching some videos of Caitlin Clark. She's really cool. She is not only a superstar on the court. I really appreciate her demeanor and the way that she seems to approach the sport. Here's a short clip of her recently being interviewed.
How have you absorbed kind of some of that criticism or talk?
Yeah, I think it's honestly like pretty similar to my college career too. I think there's, no matter what stage you're on, if you're at the highest stage, there's always going to be people that are critiquing you. There's always going to be people that are complimenting you, and I think that just speaks to like how I was raised too. Like, you know, I've never been one to like weigh the opinions of the haters too much, or, you know, I was told, like, you know, at the level you feel all the praise, that's going to be the same level you feel all the hate. So, like, I feel like I just try to stay right in the middle, and everybody's entitled to their own opinions. But I think the biggest thing for myself is, like, just having confidence in who I am and what I've been able to do with my career. And by no means do I think I'm going to go in there and score 30 points a game, but I think I'm confident in my abilities, and, you know, that's what I'm excited for.
Okay, here's what's cool about her. You can tell that she's a genuinely humble person from the way that she was just speaking. And I loved when she said, you know, everybody's entitled to their own opinion with regard to criticism. But I love her demeanor. I really, really, really like that. Yes.
I think there's an underlying cockiness there. I think
really.
I think
don't
she
sense
knows
that.
she's very good. I think that when behind the scenes she talks a little ish. She grew up with 4 brothers as a tomboy, and she probably beat them up and down the court. So I think underneath the smile and the nice demeanor, she can talk some smack.
But I think that's different from being cocky. You said there's an underlying cockiness. I actually think that she's pretty humble and she's pretty sturdy, but she knows that she's good, and that's different from being cocky. You sexist, calling a woman cocky.
Hi.
If a guy were doing that, would you call them cocky?
Yes, I would.
I'm just giving you a hard time. No, but I'm glad that you raised this, because I want to show you another clip which proves my point, Sean, of course, you can see if you sense some underlying cockiness, but I think she has this really nice balance of humility and a steady head, but also knowing that she's good and not being afraid to admit that she's good and channel the fact that she's good. Here is Caitlin talking about that very subject, and also catch at the end when she is discussing getting her degree and getting good grades.
Your mom said she's trying to get you to like quit worrying about your grades, but that you are insistent on finishing college with
my
A's.
mom like wants me to text my professors and say I'm not doing school anymore. I'm like, no, that's not how we're doing this.
Like you're
We're
going
still
out
getting
with
these
straight A's.
grades.
What do you got? Straight A's?
Yeah, basically. I'm like, I didn't do all this work for nothing. I can't slack in my last semester.
Competitor. I've seen it myself. How do you describe what makes you so unique as a competitor?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about myself is like I'm completely different off the court than I am on the court. Like when I step in between the lines, like I'm there to kind of kill. Like that's like my mentality is like you just want to go out there and be the best.
I love that. I love that. Did you see how her face changed when she's like, yeah, when I step on the court, I'm there to kill. Like she just got really like stern with it. But so on a recent episode of Dennis and Julie, Dennis and I were talking about humility, and specifically with women and attractive women, and how sometimes attractive women don't think of themselves as attractive, or they don't acknowledge that they're attractive. And we were having this back and forth about why that is or where that comes from. Tune into Dennis and Julie to check out that conversation. I'm not going to provide a long synopsis of that here. But it's something that I've been thinking about, because I think sometimes in this world, people are either too cocky and too sure of themselves. I mean, we see that with like so many of these woke people who think that they are the most enlightened individuals to ever exist, and that they know what is best for the country in every way, and they're the speech police and the thought police. Like there's an excessive cockiness sometimes. But then on the other hand, sometimes you encounter people who maybe aren't so willing to admit when they're good at something, or if they're, in the case of the conversation with Dennis, if they're attractive or talented. And I really, really appreciate this kind of middle ground that at least I sense, not knowing Caitlin, obviously, just watching some interviews with her, that she strikes of, you know, I'm not going to let the criticism or the praise go to my head, but when I step on the court, I'm there to kill, and I know I'm good. Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, no, I'm not hating. I just think she's under a lot of pressure. She's
She
a
is.
phenomenon, and she's going to have to navigate that pressure, and it's going to be tough. You know, she's been in the spotlight, much like a Kobe or a Tiger Woods from a very young age, and she has to deal with that. Like anyone would, you know, that's a lot of pressure, and from the media and financially, and she has to navigate all that and still try to be a star and be humble. So that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse to be that successful that young.
It's both.
It's both. It's absolutely both. So Caitlin is not the only athlete who I've been reading about recently who discusses criticism or self-doubt, or, you know, these kinds of themes that permeate everyone's lives, but especially, I think, professional athletes in the glaring spotlight, their lives. I was reading this New York Post article about Sean Manaea, and I definitely knew who Sean Manaea was prior to reading the New York Post article. Big fan. He is a pitcher for the New York Mets. Yes, that's right, the New York Mets.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe you're like in my wheelhouse. Okay, he came up through the Oakland Athletics organization as a young phenom. And for several years, I drafted him on my fantasy team, and he underperformed.
Falling asleep.
Underperformed. And then he moved to the Mets. Okay, go ahead.
Just riveting. No, men watching are finding this to be riveting. Yeah, that's great. That's really great. I'm glad I know that information. You know what? I may not know who, I did not know who Sean Manaea was, but I bet you cannot name a single Real Housewife. Can you name a single Kardashian?
Yeah, I
Besides
can name
Kim.
the Kardashians.
Besides Kim, can you name a single Kardashian?
Courtney.
Okay, I'm
Khloe,
very proud of you.
Rob.
You've been working with me for a year and a half. That's very good.
Yeah,
I've
no,
taught you something.
The Real Housewives would be tougher.
Yeah.
I don't think I could name any
Just
current
name
ones.
one woman's name, and you've named a Real Housewife. You'll get back to me on that. But I was reading this New York Post article where Sean Manaea was interviewed, and he was talking about performance anxiety. This is sort of in the sphere of this conversation about cockiness, because especially with men, in the professional sports arena, they don't necessarily project that they have sports anxiety or that they suffer from things like that. Maybe many of them don't. I would imagine a lot do, and they try to hide it to be macho. But I really appreciated this guy admitting it. And he talks in this New York Post article about how when he's going up to the mound to pitch, he's constantly thinking, okay, I have to lift my leg like this, and then I've got to break my hands like that as I'm pitching. He's very, very attuned to the correct form. And he said that sports anxiety can be debilitating at times. That was the word he used, debilitating. And then he goes on to talk about fear of failure, which is something he says that he's always struggled with and grappled with. And he said that the way that he has gotten through it is to not think, and I'm reading a direct quote here, to not think, quote, this is the worst outcome or this is the best outcome. He sort of said he's just tried to take this middle ground of it is what it is. I try to be even keeled about everything and not just make things worse than they are or better than they are. So what I interpret that to be is when he says when he goes up to the mound, he tries not to think about, oh my God, if I don't, get this exact form right, it's going to be the worst thing ever, or I'm going to nail this pitch. It seems like he just tries to have this kind of neutrality of just throwing it, just doing it. And I think that's really that's a great lesson for life, as a textbook overthinker. I know it's very shocking for many of you to hear, especially Sean to hear. This is the first time he's ever learning this about me. As a textbook overthinker, I think there's something to be learned from what Caitlin said in that first answer about being kind of neutral. And then what Sean Manaea is saying in that answer, where sometimes you have to be confident in your abilities and step up to the plate and not overthink and just do it. And that goes back to sort of a greater theme I often discuss in life of balancing contradictions. And that's a really hard thing as a professional athlete, as a professional, as a person in general, to balance fear of failure. And fear of failure in many ways is good. That's what propels us forward. I mean, why do we save money? Because we fear that we may not have money. Why do we, do basically anything? Why do we put our seatbelts on every day? Why do we have a social life? In some ways, everything that we do comes out of a fear that we may fail at something and that we may not be living our lives to our best potential. So fear in many ways is a good thing. But then obviously it can debilitate you. But I really like this advice of these professional athletes of kind of just getting out of your head, preparing, being confident in your abilities, and then in that moment, just letting it all go, stepping up to the plate and doing it. We should profile more professional athlete advice on the show.
I agree.
Just quick tidbit. You'll like this. I don't know if I should say the name of the player. Another player that I did not know about until I met him. I do this pickleball league every weekend.
Do you now?
I do pickleball league.
This.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That in the overthinking, 2 things you've learned about me in the past 5 minutes. I do this pickleball league on the weekends, and we were there a few weeks ago, and there's one guy on my pickleball team. It's just like a random online sports team in Los Angeles, so full of random people, and there's one guy on the team. And we're there playing pickleball, and he turns to us and he goes, "Oh my God, I'm not going to say the name of the player, but one of the most famous," no, because I'm about to criticize him.
Come on!
I'm about to criticize him. That he goes, "Oh my God, it's no. One of the most famous players on the LA Dodgers." So of course I and all the other girls on the team are like, who the heck is that? Like we never heard of him. We're looking at him. We don't recognize him. All the guys on the pickleball court are looking and they're so, excited. And I wanted to take a selfie with him and send it to my dad. Because my dad watches the Dodgers, the Lakers. He's a big sports fan. I don't know who this person is. And I go up to him, Sean, glad you're finding this to be funny. And I go up to that baseball player. And I go, hi, my name is Julie. Could I get a picture with you? He literally, like, doesn't even look at me. He just goes like, he just like kind of does this like nod. And I go, I'm like, is he deaf? And I go, could I get a picture with you? And he goes, yeah. And then we get a picture. He's not even looking in the picture. It's just to show you, so many of these athletes are so flippin' cocky. So I really appreciate these ones who are actually real and talking about the things that all of us struggle with and not acting like they're God's gift to earth because they're on some team that I don't even know about.
If I start naming Dodgers, will you wink when I get to the right person?
No, I'm not. I don't tell secrets. I was saying
Freddie
yesterday.
Freeman. Was it Freddie Freeman?
No, it wasn't.
Mookie Betts. Shohei Ohtani. Clayton Kershaw.
Keep naming. I'll give you a hint. You've already named the person.
Oh,
We're moving
really?
on. Yeah, you named the person. We're moving on. Someone's writing a bit like radical acceptance that you were previously talking about. Accept the outcome and don't ruminate on it. Yes, thank you for writing that. That is so true. For those who have no idea what that person is referring to, I did this whole show on your gut, your intuition, radical acceptance, projection, catching and flipping negative thoughts. I call it the Om show, the energy crystal healing, being a yogi on a mountaintop show. It was very energy vibey based, but seriously, that stuff is very helpful. People dismiss it as hippy dippy stuff, very helpful stuff, but yes, that is absolutely true. Radical acceptance, prepare for the moment, prepare for your meeting, prepare for your talk show, prepare for your pitch.
Yeah.
And then once you get there, leave it at the door and just do it.
That's what I was going to say. In order to be the person that just throws it, it takes years of practice and dedication and discipline and repetition so that you can forget about all that and throw it. Because if you don't have that in your quiver, in your bag, then just throwing it's going to get somebody hurt.
It's there's so much to be learned from sports. I played sports growing up. I was a swimmer, which I hated swimming. I was a soccer player and I was a water polo player. And it really is like, you really just learn so much from life. I remember in water polo when I would go up to take a penalty shot, so nerve-wracking, unbelievably nerve-wracking. And you know what a coach once told me to do? He said, do a division math problem in your head as you are waiting to throw the penalty shot. Because a lot of the times when you take the penalty shot, the referee is telling you to back up or to go forward or is looking to see if the goalie's in the right place. Like you have maybe like a minute as you're sitting there. And that's the time where, as Sean Mania would say, you're ruminating about if you're going to make it, your form, you're thinking, okay, I got to follow through, I got to this. And I remember a coach said to me, literally like try to figure out the square root of 109 as you are waiting to take, like, just do a problem in your head, think about something else, and when the whistle blows, just go. Just absolutely do it. And the final sports thing I'll say, because now we're just on the sports stuff. Another thing I really, really learned from sports that is so important in life is letting the game come to you. Sometimes when you try to force the game too much in sports, it's actually counterproductive. And I remember sometimes I would get into these games and I wanted to score a goal so badly. And I would be swimming like a maniac all around the pool. You can see I've had some distance from my water polo days. I would swim all around the pool and I'd like have this fire in my belly to score. And sometimes when you're forcing it too much, A, you become exhausted, but B, like, that's just not how the game works. You sometimes can't just go swim and get the ball and go make it happen on your own. And a lot of life is agency. A lot of life is you got to make things happen to yourself. But I think there's also a balance of that. Sometimes things have to evolve and things have to unfold in your career, in your personal life, and kind of wait it out at times and let the game come to you so that when you are throwing that pass, you'll score. Okay. Let's talk about China.
Let's go! I'm ready. That was a good halftime speech.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, someone's writing, I regret not playing sports more when I was younger. Oh my gosh, everyone should play sports. Everyone should play sports. It is a kick in the butt, that's for sure. And if you play water polo, I think water polo is one of the best. People are vicious. They would grab my suits under the water, kick me in the gut. I would come out with scratch marks and claw marks. It's a great kind of primer for the toughness of life, as we discussed yesterday. So I was going to move
last
on.
thing,
Yes,
when
thing.
Caitlin Clark got drafted to the Indiana Fever, Dr. Fauci immediately started working on a vaccination.
Where is Dr. Fauci these days? Has anybody seen him or heard from him? He was like the darling, and then he's kind of disappeared into the sunset. Let's leave him there. Okay, so I want to talk about funding at American universities. Now, this is something that people have been discussing a lot, especially in the wake of October 7th, as these campuses have been exposed as the radical cesspools that many of them are. But in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, there was a expose or a cover piece article about foreign funding at American universities, and unsurprisingly, they specifically focused on China. China. So according to the Wall Street Journal, 200 American colleges and universities all around the country have nearly 3,000 contracts with Chinese businesses. And these are multi-million-dollar contracts, and they amount to, according to the Wall Street Journal, $2.32 billion in contracts from China alone to American universities over the past 10 years. So what are these contracts? Well, China, according to the Wall Street Journal, as well as the other sources I consulted, they are the customers. So these are not gifts or grants. These are contracts. So they are going to these universities or specific departments at these universities, and they are essentially partnering with them in giving them money for research and to employ and staff many of their citizens or government officials in these universities in these various departments. So in addition to that, though, not only are there these immense contracts from Chinese companies at American universities here on American soil, but China and American universities are so intertwined that many American universities now have campuses in China. For instance, let's look here at NYU. NYU has a Shanghai campus in China. NYU is actually the single biggest recipient of Chinese funding in the United States as a university, that is, the single biggest university recipient of Chinese funding. And so a lot of these universities, not just NYU, they're no longer American universities. They have campuses all around the world. For instance, Harvard Business School has research centers in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in Singapore, not just in the Asia Pacific, but they also have research centers in Paris, in India, in Dubai, Istanbul, Tel Aviv, Japan, in Latin America. And all of this sounds great, right? Like, wow, you're spreading the influence, or you're spreading the opportunity. But and obviously, of course, in some cases, that is a good thing and an immense opportunity. But when it comes to our number one adversary, China, we need to take a closer look at what is really going on with both the contracts that they have with American universities here on American soil, and also the campuses that these American universities are having in China. Because, as my mother says, the golden rule is not just the famous line, treat others how you would want to be treated. The real golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules. And that is the case with China. They've got the gold, they're paying the money, they make the rules. So let's look at some examples of these contracts, where they are and what is happening on the surface, and then what many people speculate, and that is a keyword, speculate, is really going on. Because when the whole strategy of China, and it has been remarkably successful, is to obviously not be overt with the way that they are spying on us or undermining us or trying to infiltrate into our way of life. They package it as something great and as research or as, donations, but then there's always something else going on because, no offense, China is not doing this out of the benevolence of their heart. There's an agenda. So just to name a few examples, again, according to the Wall Street Journal, because, are you going to do the ding?
Ding! Julie Hartman, not gay.
I cite my sources, unlike the former president of my alma mater, Claudine Gay.
Tamara.
Good job. Good job, Tamara. That is a very famous Real Housewife. I'm very proud of you. I really am. You get a cookie. That was great. Okay, so let's look at some of these examples, according to the Wall Street Journal. So, the University of Michigan. They have, among other things, a automated vehicle testing facility. Pretty cool, right? Well, at the University of Michigan automated vehicle testing facility, they got $1 million in contracts from DD Global. And DD Global is basically like China Uber. It's a Chinese ride-sharing app. And they have come in the name of research and advancing automated vehicle testing. But what many government entities, as well as independent research organizations, have surmised is that this is a way for these individuals to carry out intellectual property theft, to come into the United States, have these contracts, say, oh, we want to collaborate you with, automated vehicle testing, and then they see, the way that we're doing it, the United States secrets, and then they take it back, bring it back home, and they're one of the top automated vehicle manufacturers. Now, of course, I'm not saying that every single person who is affiliated with these contracts is, doing it out of malevolence. Of course not. And you know what? In some ways, perhaps these collaborations are fruitful for both the United States and China. However, China is our number one adversary. They have been spectacularly and devastatingly successful at infiltrating and undermining us. They are almost single-handedly responsible for the fentanyl epidemic and overdose catastrophe that we have here in the United States. They spy on us with spy balloons. They spy on us through TikTok and seize our data. They have a spy base on Cuba. They buy our farmland here in the United States and spy on our bases there. They steal billions and billions of dollars in our intellectual property, and this appears to be one of the primary ways that they get access to that information and that intellectual property. They buy off our leaders, especially our president, Joe Biden, with the famous 10% to the big guy line in the Hunter Biden laptop email. They harass anti-CCP candidates. For instance, there was a congressional candidate in the state of New York who ran for state congressional office in 2022, and he espoused very hardline anti-CCP messages. And it was found actually that the Chinese Communist Party had sent 2 individuals who were thankfully caught by the FBI to go out and physically harm that candidate. So China's not our friend. So when we're reading this, not saying all of it is bad and not that every single person associated with it is bad, but they have an agenda and they know what they're doing, and we have to be shrewd enough to be aware of it.
You forgot about their kicking our butts in lithium.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole bloodbath thing with Trump and wanting to manufacture cars in Mexico and sell them to us up here. The whole bloodbath, that's what that was all about. And, the little thing called Wuhan.
Oh, yes, that's right. That little thing that all of us have so badly wanted to forget. That's right, unleashing a global pandemic and then taking no responsibility from it and actually gaslighting that they were not the ones behind it. So we have that example at the University of Michigan with the automobile testing facility.
Before you move on, how do you feel about automated driving? Do you think the world would be better if all driving were automated? I'm kind of torn because there are crazy drivers, and it would be nice to eliminate crazy drivers. But driving your own vehicle, there's something
I love driving.
free and American about it.
That's a really good way to put it. It's a very, very good way to put it. Absolutely. Well, you know what? The thing that I oppose about it, and technological innovation is a miracle, absolute miracle. I was just reading about the advent of antibiotics. Literally, for thousands of years of human history, up until about 100 years ago, if you got an infection, you had a pretty large chance of dying, and we have recently developed antibiotics. Obviously, we have all these advances in surgery and drugs and testing. I mean, obviously, technological innovation is a great thing. But the story that I love from the Torah is the story of the Tower of Babel, and how all of these individuals were building. They were creating this tower to go to the heavens, essentially. And whether or not you believe in God, these stories are insights into human nature. I always say that God is like a divine life coach, and the Bible is a divine life manual. It's a manual on human nature. So this story is very practical in addition to religious. And so all these people are trying to build a tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves. And God essentially disperses them and has them speak different languages. That's where the origin of the term Babel comes from. That's sort of the biblical story, which explains why we have so many different languages. But the whole point of the story is that building for the sake of building to make a name for yourself, doesn't lead to something good. And that has to be curbed. And we are now in the 21st century at a point in our lives where we need to consider when technological innovation goes too far. Because if we just keep innovating, it sounds great, and we've really associated innovation with positivity, and in many ways we should. But we can't just keep innovating until there's nothing left, right? Like, we can't live in this world where no one is driving, no one is going to pick up their food. You can order Uber Eats to your door. No one's interacting with anybody because they can Zoom. Nobody has any real relationships because they can have an AI girlfriend. We're out innovating ourselves where we don't even live in everyday life anymore. So that's a little bit of a long answer to your question. The short answer is no, I do not want automated vehicles. I want people driving, doing something for themselves. So that's the University of Michigan example. Here's another one. The University of Arizona in 2022 got a $1.5 million contract with AppTech, which is one of China's biggest biotech conglomerates. And they, AppTech, paid the University of Arizona $30,000 roughly a piece for each subject that was enrolled in trials for testing of a drug. That's, again, according to the Wall Street Journal. So again, you just have to kind of contemplate what's going on here. Are they coming into these testing facilities, and are they seeing the way that we do things and stealing from us? Is there something more malevolent and more COVID-y going on, with gain of function research? I mean, those who are listening to this thinking that I'm spouting conspiracy theories should consult with the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times does these eerie exposés of these secret biolabs that China has in the United States and here in California, where they're concocting these various tests, and there are these bacteria and diseases in these tubes, and it's very unsanitary, and it's like, what is going on there? And so again, we just have to ask from one of our biggest adversaries who has engaged in terrible, to put it lightly, behavior, what is their incentive for going to the University of Arizona and having an eye and a hand in research of testing? Another example, 2018, the University of Washington launched an artificial intelligence center, and Huawei, alongside Facebook and Google, was one of the biggest contract conglomerates in that project. Could be benign, could not be benign, could be intellectual property theft. Here's a really kind of glaring one. From 2018 to 2022, according to the Wall Street Journal, Air China, as well as other Chinese carriers, paid the University of North Dakota to have their pilots train at U.S. military air bases. So the University of North Dakota has an aviation center where they help train pilots. And so China, Air China to be specific, sent many of their pilots, I think as much as 30% of their pilots, to train at the University of North Dakota. One of the main U.S. military air bases that they trained at was Grand Forks Air Force Base, which has some of our biggest supply of drones and satellites. A little sketchy, right? Causing some eyebrows to be raised. Why wouldn't China want to train their pilots in China or in Japan? You know, I mean, it's a long way to come to the United States. I think I know the answer to why they want to do that. And I think you can surmise the answer too. But you know, we see this with other examples, not just with China, that there's a lot of foreign funding to universities in the United States. And again, not all of it is necessarily draconian or coming from a place of malevolence. But what is very clear is that there is an influence campaign that is going on. So let's look, for instance, at a country like Germany. Germany gives a lot of money to United States colleges and universities, also not just in terms of gifts, but in terms of contracts. And here's one example. Germany gave over $1 billion to the University of Pennsylvania in 2018. And then President Biden, who has a Penn Biden think tank center named after him in Washington, D.C. That was one of the places, by the way, where many of the classified documents were discovered, was at that Penn Biden think tank center. And the University of Pennsylvania paid Joe Biden $1 million in 2018 to 2019. So Germany gives $1 billion to the University of Pennsylvania. The University of Pennsylvania is tied with the President of the United States. He wasn't president then. Obviously, he's president now. And then in 2021, President Biden named the president of the University of Pennsylvania, Amy Gutmann, to be the ambassador to Germany, the U.S. ambassador to Germany. So look, there's not like a secret like proof of a exact agenda that I or anyone else can provide. But you see the way this works. Country gives a lot of money to a university. A university is tied with an influential person. If that country is influential to the university wants to prioritize that country's interests. And then it so happens that the president of the United States, who the university is paying, makes the head of that university the ambassador to Germany. There's a lot of lines there that maybe aren't exactly connectable, but you see money sloshing around, influence growing, and you can get the picture. One of the biggest threats to the United States, according to the State Department, according to the FBI, and according to politicians who are willing to see it and acknowledge it, are these things called Confucius Institutes. So China not only has these contracts with the University of Arizona and the University of Michigan, the University of Florida, all of those colleges for various research initiatives, but they also have established Confucius Institutes, which, according to the Chinese government, were intended to provide Chinese language and cultural training to people in the United States. And so there were about 100 Confucius Institutes all over the country in 2019, until former President Donald Trump, Orange Man Bad, decided to make it illegal for the US government to fund these Confucius Institutes. So yes, here is a picture of one of them. I'm not sure which campus that is on in the United States, but they are all over, or were at least all over the United States. It's a little unclear. Many of them have been shut down. There is evidence that some of them are still running, but under different names. But here is a map, as you can see, of all of the different places in the United States where Confucius Institutes were. And when you go to these online databases and look specifically at the names of the schools, oh my gosh, these were everywhere. San Diego State University had a Confucius Institute, the University of Chicago, the University of Rhode Island, the University of Nebraska, Colorado State University, University of Oregon, University of Montana, University of New Hampshire. Shall I go on? Tufts University also had a Confucius Institute, and UCLA. I think we have a photo of the logo of the Confucius Institute at UCLA. So, of course, this is packaged as Chinese language and cultural training. Great! Bringing that to the United States. But according to the Government Accountability Office, Confucius Institutes have gone beyond just this cultural and language training at the colleges and universities where they were located. The Government Accountability Office said that they also did what was called outreach into many businesses in the area, and also brought Confucius Institute learning to American K through 12 schools. And the FBI has said that this is one of the ways that China endeavors to steal intellectual property, to kind of have an eye in America's way of life, specifically in our universities. The FBI and other entities have also said that this is a way for them to peddle pro-Beijing propaganda and sentiment. And also, many believe that this is a way for the Chinese Communist Party to keep tabs on Chinese nationals, Chinese students who have student visas to study at American universities, to see that those Chinese nationals are behaving and to keep an eye on them. And as I have talked about on this show, we, the terrible, imperialist, patriarchal, sexist, xenophobic United States, we are the #1 biggest grantor of foreign student visas to Chinese students than any other country on planet Earth. According to ICE in 2020, the United States alone in that 1 year, and by the way, that was COVID year, so if anything, that year would have fewer foreign student visas because of the lockdowns. In 2020, the United States awarded over 382,000 foreign student visas to Chinese students alone. That is twice the number of the second place country, India, and more than 5 times the number of the third place country, which is South Korea. So China's doing all this stuff to infiltrate, undermine us, spy on us, cause American citizens to overdose on fentanyl. And we are giving them contracts at American universities. And we are giving foreign visas to students. And of course, many of these Chinese students are not the same thing as the Chinese Communist Party. I have enormous sympathy for many of these students who want to come to study in America, learn from America. They're victims of that regime. But we in the United States are so liberal, we are so generous, that we are rewarding our adversaries for undermining us. We've got to cut that off immediately. Absolutely immediately. No question about it. Why would you give this reward to the greatest international force in the world, and certainly in our own country? It is beyond asinine. But, you know, it goes back to this kind of general feeling or thought or kind of cultural diet that we consume in the United States of xenophobia. and how, it would be unfair to cut off student visas or to curb funding in the United States. And that just, quite frankly, is a totally distorted way of looking at the world. If we could wave a magic wand and create the world from scratch, we would be perfectly generous and helpful to everyone. But there isn't something to be ashamed of punishing an enemy, of putting up boundaries, of banning certain things. That's just the way the world works. I mean, think about, would China allow us to do to them what they're doing to us? Of course they wouldn't. Would many other countries allow us to do to them what they do to us? I always say this, like, when I've talked about on the show the collapse of the American university, and boy, that's like a 15-part series that one can do. But one of the main things that I've kind of uncovered is that American universities cease to be American universities. Many of them got rid of their Western civilization requirement, for instance. They don't view themselves as American, and they don't teach American values or Western civilization values. And the big reason why many of those universities don't do that is because it was deemed to be intellectually imperialist. Where if you have a diverse student body, and especially an international student body, then it's intellectually imperialist to teach that international student body the elements of your own culture. No. That's backwards. We should be tolerant of other people's cultures. We should teach, a plethora of things. I certainly don't. I don't know many people who would oppose that. But that doesn't mean that we cease being who we are. If international students are coming to American universities, they're coming onto our turf. And our turf is our rules. Just as if American students go abroad to study at other foreign universities, no one would bat an eye if you go to a university in China and they demand that you learn the principles of Confucianism or the principles of communism. No one would bat an eye if you go study in the Middle East and you are mandated to take an Islamic studies course, because you're going to their turf, and their turf is their rules. But we have this idea that the rules shouldn't apply to us, right? Like, we should be so generous. We can't be intellectually imperialist. We can't insist on certain standards, but then everybody else can. And when they do it, it's okay. But when we do it, it's somehow bigoted. It is okay to punish enemies. It is okay to set boundaries. And we have to do this with China's infiltration. One of the individuals who I hugely admire, who has been at the vanguard of doing this very thing, has been the amazing governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. He has tried, at the very least, to pass legislation to curb Confucius Institutes, to bar state-funded universities from entering contracts with some of our principal adversaries, China, Russia, and Iran. Here's a clip of him from a few years ago talking about China's infiltration and his endeavors to curb Confucius Institutes.
The growing presence of the Chinese Communist Party influence in domestic and international affairs is one of the most pervasive threats to American security and prosperity. The long-term goals and interests of the Chinese Communist Party are antithetical to the basic tenets of the American Republic. Florida will take a leading role by proposing important steps to address past, current, and future concerns of the Chinese Communist Party and other foreign influence in the governmental, economic, and academic affairs of our state. So first, we're going to make sure that state agencies, state universities, local governments, and public schools never use tax dollars to establish language and culture programs with foreign governments that place the interest of those governments ahead of our own interest. You may have heard of the Confucius Institutes, which were established at universities around the country. Trump administration took important and critical steps limiting the spread of these Chinese Communist Party funded institutions. Also would note we had the skirmish at Miami-Dade College about the Confucius Institute there. With our proposal today, we will ensure that no such organization is able to regain a foothold in any Florida institution of higher education. Potential risk of exposure to intellectual property theft and foreign influence is simply too great to allow them to take root in our state. Further,
The The administrative ability of that guy is absolutely amazing. He gets it done. He gets it done. Sun Tzu, who is the famous author of The Art of Warfare, he was a war hero, not just in China, but to this day, all over the world, he's a war hero. You know what Article 1 of Sun Tzu's Art of War is? Subdue the enemy without fighting them. That is what China does. China adopts, I guess we can say, 3 pearls of wisdom. The number one thing is he who has the gold makes the rules. They've got the money. They go into the United States. They go into all these countries and they industrialize these countries. They build railroads. They build Huawei, telecommunication networks. And by doing that, then they're in charge. That's number 1. Number 2 is the Sun Tzu's Art of War, subdue the enemy without fighting them. They're too smart to, at least right now, launch these all-out invasions into countries to seize control of them. They saw the way that the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 worked out. They saw, frankly, the way that Iraq and Afghanistan worked out for the United States. And they have pursued a different course of subduing the enemies without fighting them. And then the third pearl of wisdom that China abides by is keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. They package themselves as these helpers and these contract givers and these people who are helping us research and build. But they're doing a lot more than just that. And I'll end by talking quickly about Qatar, another country which should be on our radar in addition to China, one of the top foreign funders of American university. Qatar is up there too. They provide more non-tuition money to universities than any other country in the world. There's this project called Follow the Money, which tracks foreign funding at American universities. And they have found that over the past 20 years, Qatar has given over $4 billion to American universities. And a lot of that money goes to Middle East studies programs, but similarly to China, there also appears to be this not only giving money to influence the way that universities run on American soil, but also bringing those American universities and their research and their expertise and their resources to their country. So we see here a picture. Cornell University actually has a school of medicine in Qatar. By the way, Qatari funding to Cornell from 2001 to 2023 was close to $2 billion. They are the largest foreign investor in Cornell University. Number 2 is China, which has given tens of millions of dollars to Cornell University since 1995. That's according to ISGAP. Let's look at another example, not just Cornell, but Georgetown. Georgetown University has a school of government in Qatar. Northwestern University has a journalism school in Qatar. And again, people listening may think, oh, what is so bad about this? I'm not saying that all of it is bad or that every single person involved in this is bad. You know, in many ways, it's a blessing to go international, to collaborate, of course. But Qatar is not exactly a friend of the United States. And Qatar, sort of not as bad, but like the Chinese Communist Party, is not the most ethical in their global practices, shall we say. And we see, apropos of the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules, that, for instance, with the Northwestern School of Journalism in Qatar, they put some restrictions on some of the books that would be allowed to be read there and taught there at that university. Also, there is a collaboration between Al Jazeera, which is a news agency that many deem to be unreliable, and some even say is a mouthpiece of Hamas. Al Jazeera partners very closely with the Northwestern School of Journalism in Qatar. And a lot of that money, according to the National Association of Academics in the United States, comes from the Qatar Foundation, which seeks to, quote, promote dialogue internationally to address and influence global topics. So these individuals are admitting that they endeavor to influence. And that's what they're doing. And we, at the very least, should be aware of it. What do you think, Sean? Qatar, China, contracts?
Is it still okay with you if I eat at Panda Express?
Oh, God. Oh, God. Yeah, I think that's okay. It is okay.
I had a conversation with my brother the other night, and we were talking about all the craziness going on in the world, and he asked me, do you think China's going to invade Taiwan just to pile on Biden and see what they can get away with?
Someone writes, Panda Express.
And I said to him, they don't need to. They don't need to test Joe Biden and invade Taiwan. There's no timeline because they've been playing the long game for a long time, and you just went through the whole thing, so I don't need to. But
yeah,
I think you're saying a lot of things that people should pay attention to.
Well, yeah, well, as you say, it's not just with Taiwan. I mean, they may invade Taiwan. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But with the United States, I mean, they don't need to invade us. They've got us, they've got us bought off. They've got us controlled. So why would they waste their manpower and their, at least right now, their army, all of that to invade when they control us? Oh, and I didn't even talk about the contracts that they have with American newspapers. China Daily, one of the main CCP news outlets, state-run news outlets in China, has all these contracts with American publications such as Time Magazine. Time Magazine had a China Daily heading on their website, which is just full of Chinese Communist Party propaganda articles. But again, we in the United States hold ourselves to totally different standards. We can allow our biggest adversary to come in and push propaganda here in the United States. That's okay. And if we're opposed to that, then we are xenophobic. But they would never allow us to do it there.
Yeah. Hombre, naranjo.
I know.
malo.
Let's bring the guy back. Dear God. Dear God.
Pero, pollo naranjo bueno.
That's right, especially at Panda Express. Let's talk about MyPillow. So as you know, I use a lot of MyPillow products. I sleep on a MyPillow. I sleep on the Giza Dream bed sheets. I use my towels. And of course, and especially, I use my slippers. I love my slippers. And you can get a lot of these products at an immense discount right now. They're having a $25 extravaganza, which is just what it sounds like. You can get 2-pack multi-use MyPillows for $25, MyPillow sandals for $25, 6-pack towel sets for $25, 4-pack dish towels for $25, the premium MyPillows with all new Giza fabric for, you guessed it, $25. Orders over $75 will receive free shipping. I use many of these products. As I said, I wouldn't advertise it if I didn't use it and didn't like it. So go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 today and use the promo code Hartman. Before we turn on this China point, I was speaking with someone recently who had a baby. And she was telling me that she really wants to make her baby multilingual because she doesn't speak any other language besides English. She wants to have her child from a very young age learn a lot of languages. And I said, oh, that's cool. Which languages do you want your child to learn? She said, well, I think I'm going to have him take Spanish classes and definitely Mandarin. And I said, why Mandarin? And then she goes, well, if they invade or if they take over the United States, I at least want my child to be able to speak the language. And honestly, it's something that we laugh at, but she's not exactly crazy. She's really not. I mean, and I'm not saying that they're necessarily going to invade. I have no idea, but the reach of the Chinese Communist Party and their infiltration in the United States, it's not a joke, man, as President Biden would say. But I said to her, don't give in. No. Don't give in to that. But maybe she's the smart one. Okay, so quickly before we end on a life advice segment, I love those recently. Given the whole talk about projection and gut and intuition, I've had a lot of people write into me saying how helpful those things were. I have another good one for you at the end. But before we talk about that, I'd like to spend some time discussing Sudan. which few people discuss and few people care about these days, but we should. What is going on in Sudan is utterly devastating. They are facing a collapse of civilization and a famine. So the background is that Sudan, which is a country in Africa of over 47 million people, about a year ago descended into civil war when two generals came together to oust the former dictator of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir. This was a military and paramilitary force that came together to oust him. And then, in a very predictable turn of events, once the dictator was out, those two forces started fighting with each other for power. This has happened for as long as human civilization has existed. The most famous example is Julius Caesar, when Mark Antony and Octavian banded together to get rid of Julius Caesar, and then Mark Antony and Octavian turned on each other, and then Octavian became Caesar Augustus. This is what happened in Haiti, where these different gangs, came together to oust the president or prime minister, and then they started turning on each other and fighting. This is what happens. But right now there is a conflict between the Rapid Support Forces, which is an Arab paramilitary force. They're actually a nomad militia group from the Sahel region in Africa. That's the RSF. And they are fighting against the Sudan Armed Forces, the SAF, in this civil war vying for power. And there have been just unspeakable atrocities. Obviously, infrastructure has collapsed. The banking system has collapsed. There is a massive shortage of food and water. 8.5 million people, according to the Wall Street Journal, have been displaced from their homes in the past year. Doctors Without Borders, the nonprofit organization, said in February, also according to the Wall Street Journal, that in one of the main camps where they operate in Sudan, a child is dying from starvation every 2 hours. According to the United Nations, by the end of this year, it is estimated that over 800,000 people will have starved to death in Sudan. And in addition to that, not only are people starving and dying from malnutrition and not having clean water, but there are disease outbreaks, and there is a huge cholera outbreak right now in Sudan. And so a few weeks ago when we were talking, and I have to add one other thing, the RSF, which are the Rapid Support Forces, that's the Arab paramilitary force in Sudan, their fighters have been committing atrocities against the indigenous Black community in the Darfur region of Sudan. And thousands of the indigenous members of the indigenous Black community there have been slaughtered by those Arab paramilitary fighters. So a few weeks ago on this show, we were discussing the situation in Haiti. Give me as I'm fixing this here. So a few weeks ago on this show, we were discussing the situation in Haiti, which, like Sudan, has descended into essentially a civil war, and Haiti is run by gangs. There is starving, malnutrition, disease outbreak, and by many reports, there's actually cannibalism going on in Haiti. And I asked the question, why is it that, speaking generally, of course not everyone, but speaking generally in the Western world, and not just in the Western world, but really all around the world, few people seem to care about the plight of those in Haiti and the plight of those in Sudan? We see almost every day here in the United States that there are sit-ins, protests all around the country of people against the war in Gaza. Most recently at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, they blocked the entrance. At the San Francisco airport, they blocked the entrance. In front of the New York Stock Exchange, I played that video the other day where they were holding the American flag, yelling, "Death to America." Also in Chicago, there were those chants, "Hands off Iran." People seem to care very much about things pertaining to Israel. But then when people in Haiti are starving and victims of rape and slaughter and gang violence, and people in Sudan are victims of similar atrocities, crickets. No one seems to care, right? Here's, by the way, an Instagram post that I came across that I want to show you. This person, I thought it was brilliant, posted a photo of these various plazas all around the world and said, massive rallies today in London, Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam for the 10.7 million people displaced by war and starving in Sudan. And then you see that all of those places are empty. And so I asked the question, why? And I have come up with an answer. And that is that people generally do not care about the suffering of others unless it can be spun to their political benefit. We see this domestically and we see this internationally, where people claim to be so concerned with the plight and suffering of non-white people. But when it's non-white people who are inflicting that pain and suffering onto non-white people, those individuals don't care. Many of them only care when it is a, quote, white person or country inflicting suffering on a non-white person or country. We see this here in the United States, where 97% of all Black homicide victims are killed by other Black people. Just this past weekend in Chicago, a 9-year-old girl was shot in the inner city by a 9-year-old Black girl was shot by another Black person. Nobody cares. But then when it's a white person who kills a Black person, there's immense outrage. And that is morally bankrupt, because Black lives matter equally, regardless of who the perpetrator is. Black lives matter when it is a Black person killing a Black person, and Black lives matter when it is a white person killing a Black person. But this is not just something in the United States, this is globally. People, of course, should care about the suffering and the displacement and the famine in Gaza. It is immensely tragic when innocent Israelis, innocent Palestinians, innocents everywhere are dying and suffering. Of course, people should care about that. But there is a zoomed in laser focus on the plight of those in Gaza because many people can spin it to their political benefit. They can go, oh, white country, Israel, which again is absurd because half of Israel is non-white. They call it a white settler colonial nation. Half are non-white. But they can, you see my point, where they can point to Israel and go, white country oppressing non-white people. Just as when a white person kills a Black person in the United States, white person killing non-white person. But then in Haiti, when it's Black people killing Black people, or in Sudan, when it's Black people killing Black people, or Arabs killing Black people, or when it's in Rwanda, when it's Black people killing Black people, or when it's in South Asia, when it's Pakistanis massacring Bengalis, as occurred in the 70s, or when it's in China, when China is massacring Uyghur Muslims, whenever it's non-white versus non-white, nobody cares. And that, to me, as I have opined before, that is actually white supremacist. It's white supremacist in the sense that you are essentially saying that non-white people's suffering only matters and is only deserving of our attention and our outrage when it is white people who are responsible for or inflicting that suffering. All lives matter. All non-white and white lives matter, regardless of who the person is or who the perpetrator is. But it is just staggering that we in the United States fancy ourselves to be these moral titans who care so much about the plight of the underdog and of, minorities, and previously, at least in the United States, discriminated against individuals. No. The evidence is in. It's only when it can be spun for a political benefit. And that is the most insulting thing of all. So, hey, Sudan is another example. Imagine if you walked up to the average person on the street, and especially one of the Palestine protesters, and said, "Can you tell me one thing about Sudan?" They would not be able to tell you. They wouldn't even know what's going on there. And if you told them, if you said, you're talking about how many people in Gaza have been displaced, 8.5 million people in Sudan have been displaced. According to the UN, by the end of the year, over 800,000 people in Sudan will have died of starvation. Will you give that same energy, that same outrage to what's going on in Sudan as you will to what's going on in Gaza? They won't. That's at least my take on it. Do you think that's fair, Sean?
Yeah, we need more protests.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what we need. No, we need equal attention and equal outrage to the suffering of people, not just when it can be spun to a political benefit.
Yeah, no, you made a devastating point, and I just tried to inject some humor. But I see exactly what you're saying. It makes all the sense in the world. And if the trick-or-treaters are going to go out and protest, they should be mindful about what the cause is and why. Well,
can you imagine how people in Sudan feel, or not just in Sudan, but the many around the world who suffer? I mean, according to the Global Slavery Index, there are 50 million slaves today worldwide. And by the way, many of the products that we use, including and especially our iPhones, the lithium and the cobalt, the materials in those iPhones, are sourced from slave labor in places like the Congo. We don't care. We're not these moral titans, And I'm not claiming to be holier than thou. I have an iPhone. I'm trying to be much more aware of the things that I use. But if I'm not the most perfect moral person in the world for having an iPhone, at least I can admit that I am not a moral titan. What bothers me is that these individuals who claim to be like the most enlightened arbiters of morality, and they don't care. They're not. We can't fancy ourselves as those individuals. And it's amazing when people like Don Lemon, as recently demonstrated with the interview with Elon Musk, is talking about the legacy of slavery in the United States. If you really, really cared about the legacy of slavery, you would not be focusing on the way that it has been massively uprooted and moved on from in the United States. You would be focusing on not just the legacy, but the existence of slavery all around the world. Oy, gets me going. Someone is putting a bullseye emoji. Thank you. Well, it's true. Okay, final part of the show. Talking about politics, let's turn to something non-political, which are my favorite things to do. So recently, as I have said, I did this show on gut and intuition and negative thoughts and projection and life advice, and I was very delighted to get a lot of emails from people at julie@julie-hartman.com who appreciated some of those talking points, some of those suggestions that I had. And I've been thinking about incorporating stuff like this more into the show. Advice that I get, or things that I learn, or things that I see other people doing that I think are worthwhile, that can elevate our lives. And I've recently engaged in a practice that I want to tell you about that I have already noticed has changed and improved my life. And that is
pickleball.
Pickleball with the aforementioned Dodgers player who you did name, but I will not acknowledge who it is because, I don't know, keeping it classy.
Because you're keeping it classy.
Keeping it classy. I do sort of want to say who it is because he was so cocky. He was so self-assured. You know what I should have done? I ended up taking the selfie with him, but when he kind of like gave the eye roll and didn't even answer me when I asked, I should have just walked away. I should have made him feel like, okay, I don't care about you. You're going to be cocky. I'm going to walk away from you. Next time, when I encounter my next Dodgers player who I don't know the name of, I'm going to do that. But I've recently engaged in a practice which has already organized and elevated my life, and that is journaling. Now, we hear about journaling a lot. This is not like some new earth-shattering revelation. But at least speaking personally, I, for much of my life, kind of shrugged off journaling. I was too lazy to do it. I felt like I didn't have the time. I didn't think it would really help me. And also, I felt like I had to be comprehensive. Whenever I would sit down to journal, I would start writing about one thing in my life, and then I would go, oh, well, I should write about that other thing and that other thing. Oh, God, that's so much work. I'm not going to do it. But I want to pause and ask you, Sean, a question, and people in the chat the question, and those of you in the producer's dungeon this question. How many of you have a notebook or have a journal? Do you have a notebook?
None of us do.
Why does that not shock me?
Oh, Zach has a diary. It's pink.
So wait, really? He has a diary and it's pink? Sorry, I missed that. I was reading the chat. That's sweet.
No,
so people
none
are
of us
writing
journal.
nope. Some people are writing yes. So great. For people, yes. Good for you. For people, nope. I would suspect that a lot of people would say no. I actually kind of crowdsourced and asked some people in my life if they have a journal. Obviously, it's anecdotal evidence. I didn't do a huge comprehensive survey of the American population, but the general answer that I get is no. Or as someone just wrote in the chat, I do, but I don't use it. So let me tell you something. Journaling will change your life. It really will. Someone just wrote, no, but I would like to. Okay. If you took anything away from my projection, intuition, gut episode, let me tell you that I am communicating with the same fervor as I did about that with this journaling thing. Because there are two benefits of journaling. Number one, you learn about yourself. We need to know ourselves. That's something very few people really know themselves. Know their strengths, know their weaknesses, know what bothers them, know what matters to them. We sort of like, as we go about our everyday lives, we think we have a grasp of these things because, things float into our head, stuff that we're thinking about. But actually, it's sort of always like swirling in us like a hurricane that we are sometimes aware of, but we don't really have a comprehensive understanding of, again, who we are, what matters to us, what concerns us, what we want, what we're good at, and what we're not good at. And that is the key to life. That is so important for people to understand. And so when I'm talking about journaling, I'm not necessarily saying recounting all of the events of the day, although I think that's helpful. And by the way, just a quick suggestion, for those who want to get into journaling, as I'm seeing in the chat, but maybe are hesitant or don't really know how to, you don't have to start with something totally comprehensive. Every single day, just take one piece of paper in your notebook, put the date on the top, and write 4 bullet points of something that happened to you that day or something that you learned. Just start with that. You don't need to go into immense detail, but just keep a little catalog of stuff that happened. Sean's going to cut in before I go on.
Well, I'm just saying, like, people vlog or they take pictures of their breakfast burrito or
No.
they put pictures on Instagram. That's not journaling.
Dear God, no. How is that journaling?
And you're saying
that's
you actually have
broadcasting your life.
to write it down. You can't, like,
Yes.
keep it digitally?
No, you can't keep it digitally. So what I used to do is when I would go about my daily life and learn something or realize I had to do something or etc., I would take out my notes app and I would write it in my notes. And here's what would end up happening. I would never look back at the notes. I would forget that they were there. And then when I would go back and look at the notes, it looked like I was a schizophrenic person. Like I would write like, Ian, call. And I'd be like, who the hell is Ian? What did I mean when I say that? Or, like on a random piece of thing, I would go like Clorox wipes. What? Like we're so disorganized. And I am telling you, invest in a notebook. And here's the formula. Every single day, start small. Write 4 to 5 bullet points of what happened to you that day, or crucially, a feeling that you had or something that you learned. You can write the event, draw an arrow, and then write 1 sentence of what you learned. And then I would use that at the top half of the page. And then in the bottom half of the page, I would sort of generally write about things that you want or that are concerning you or that you hope to do. sort of like a to-do list. But I can't stress enough, it needs to be on a piece of paper. You have to write it down. It cannot be in a notes app. You have to write it down. And sort of organize it in categories of events, concerns, goals that you have. And I promise you that you will see your life become more organized and more clear.
I think I'm going to start journaling about today's show. So,
well, you do
Clark,
do that.
Badass.
Someone is writing, are you using a fountain pen for journaling? Oh my gosh. If Dennis Prager is watching, Dennis, cover your ears. No. And Dennis, cover your ears, especially at the second thing. I got to say, fountain pens they're fun to write, but the ink bleeds. I don't like
trying to
fountain
journal
pens.
over here. You're interrupting my journaling. American universities slowly selling us out to China.
Yes, that's right. No one cares about
Pay
Sudan.
attention to Sudan.
Caitlin Clark is
Journal.
a badass.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe you should do that at the end of every show. Maybe bullet point the main takeaways. That might be fun. Julie's journal.
But
I can see it now.
I like that. We'll do it. Maybe it'll be an email list. But this is the main thing. Few of us really know ourselves. We think we know ourselves, but we don't. And I can promise you, journaling and writing the stuff down makes things clearer to you about what you want and what you fear and what you want to prioritize. And then you'll go about your life the next day and you'll behave differently, or you're more likely to check things off of your to-do list that you forget about but are always kind of nagging at you. It is like a brilliant life organizer. And the final thing I'll say about it is, on this show recently, I welcomed Joshua Becker on, who is a former pastor. Great interview, by the way, if you want to see it. And he is the writer of this blog called becomingminimalist.com. And he basically advocates for all of us to declutter our lives, like literally physically declutter them. And he made this great argument that seems so obvious, but I didn't even consider, where he said your physical possessions take up so much of your time and energy, even just managing them. I mean, how many of us have to clean out our garages or clean out our closets, or we're looking for things all the time? We don't realize how much of our physical possessions are a distraction to us. And he was saying, when you get rid of a lot of that stuff and you really just live with the basics, your life becomes simpler and you become more organized and you become a happier, elevated individual as a result, with more time to live your life in the way that you want to live it. And I think journaling in this way that I've proposed, with the bullet points and just keeping it simple, is sort of like a journal version of the Joshua Becker Minimalist Counsel, where it's about simplifying your life, keeping track of some things that happened to you, some things you learned, your to-do list, things that you want to do. Do that every day, keep it simple, and your life will improve. I promise. It's improved for me. And then if you really want to elevate your journaling, there's this great book called The Conversation Piece here. These are super fun books, and they have all these questions about, and they're intended for dinner conversation. You should get it for Thanksgiving with crazy relatives to avoid talking about politics or religion. Get this book. It's like the best Thanksgiving dinner table book. But if you really want to go on a journey of learning about yourself, get this book and answer some of the questions in the book. It's very cool. It's my life advice saga for today. I expect everybody to get a notebook by the end of this and try it. Trust me, you'll thank me later. And I'm still on the journey of bettering myself and learning, and I'll keep you updated with all the life advice I get and hope to impart. So thank you for being here. I'm so glad. People writing in the chat, good advice, that you're appreciating this. People are advocating for me to use a fountain pen too. We'll have to work on that some other time, but I'll see you next week right here on Timeless with Julie Hartman Live, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And check out Dennis and Julie on Sunday at that same time, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. Bye, everyone. Go ahead and journal. See you soon.